Really interesting perspective on this, and really kind of talks to what I was talking about earlier about the power of story in the human brain, that it comes back to experience, that we actually experience stories in the same way that we experience reality, and we retell those stories in the water cooler. And it's in the retelling that we're actually reconfirming the validity of the story, enhancing meaning, increasing meaning and empathy, and all of those things that we look at and actually can now measure neurologically. I'd like to actually invite all of my presenters back up. We're going to have a little opportunity for some Q&A. And I hope that some of you have some questions, and then we'll hear from our community, and then get back to a little bit of networking. So thanks, guys. Thanks for all joining me back. Is everybody on?
I'll set it up.
Okay.
Did you switch on?
All right. Who's on first? I'll ask that person a question. Does everybody get live?
No.
Let's see. How about that? Okay. Eric's on. Eric's up first then. So Eric, when we met, we talked a lot about narrative storytelling versus context. And I know that in a game like Tomb Raider, you wrote a lot of backstory that never... And cutscenes that you should never do, that never saw the light of day. And so talk a little bit about the importance of context and that backstory that never sees the light of day.
Well, actually, you trapped me, because I've been doing this so long, and the production constraints were so high that I actually minimized that a great deal on Tomb Raider. I only made what we're going to put on the screen because of production pressure. In terms of backstory, I know how easy it is to go down the garden path of generating content that never informs the screen. Not only doesn't appear on the screen, but to make things consistent so that you get the characterizations and basically this is writing 101, which you don't see in video games, so I don't think I should explain it that much. But I was in charge of Lara Croft for a number of years, and because there was so much weight behind her in the community, it took a lot of writing behind the scenes to frame what her character was, both in terms of what we thought she was internally and what the community thought. I actually worked with Tony Gard, who invented Lara Croft, and one of the first things that he and I agreed on is that Lara was a psychopath. And that was something that was generally not believed by a large proportion of the audience. They actually believed she was a hero. And she was not, she was an anti-hero. So I had to do a lot of rule-making and documentation that later informed the writing and the plotting and the dialogue, where I could thread this needle of letting people who knew that she was just, an asshole who just killed anybody who was in front of her, versus the people that thought she was, out to save the world.
And a lot of innocent animals as well.
Oh yeah. That was not as controversial as my
Great. And in comparison to that, and I know because with Eric, you didn't work with the film writers, did you?
No. Back then, there was a lot more of a wall between gaming and Hollywood, and the licensors were pretty much in two different camps. The movies back then, they pretty much threw it over the wall because they wanted to make things that were pretty incompatible with the vision of the game, and they weren't interested in the cross connection, and they also didn't like the characterization that was present in the video games. So they really wanted a star vehicle for who, and that's where they went.
So in comparison, now it is a couple of years later and a little bit more control over the CSI characters than anybody has over Angelina Jolie. You were actually able to work with the writers in Hollywood and in the writers' room, and they were excited about this. I'm going to actually start with Jordan, but I'd like to put it out to the whole panel to ask what you think the changes are that Hollywood writers are now interested in writing for games.
Well, I think the changes, the experiences that I had on CSI are already like a year and a half, 2 years old, and I think it's actually evolved since then even further. The interactive the interactive field just keeps growing. I mean, maybe the traditional blockbuster games aren't the exploding field that they once were, but the opportunity online is bigger than ever, and there's fewer and fewer major Hollywood films being made. So I definitely think there has been and continues to be a lot of interest, and a lot of writers who, want to get in early and get their foot in the door in interactive because they know that there's a learning process. They know that they need to build a resume, and as someone creating interactive product, that creates opportunities for sure. And just as an aside, Tomb Raider is an amazing game, and I can't wait to tell my brother that we met because
Eric's giving out autographs later. So, Marty, Eric, do you think that there's been a change? Have you experienced changes yourself with Hollywood?
One thing that I found interesting about what you were talking about was a lot of my complaints have been that Hollywood screenwriters do not generally understand interactive because of the high constraints that the 3x structure and the 95 pages and et cetera, et cetera. But you're talking about episodic content, and that's a whole different ballgame. And a lot of the things that you need for interactive are more compatible with the kind of things you see in TV writing because of the nature of crafting scenes that aren't quite so lockstep front to back, because you don't have large arcs sometimes. You have to do the build and design. It ends where it starts, it ends where it starts, it ends where it starts. And those types of writers, I think, can have a lot more of a head start in terms of how to write interactive.
Yeah, and I think another huge thing is just that the situation is kind of reversed in terms of the flow of IP. So you're going from, used to be a big movie would happen and then there would be games to support it or comic books to support it or whatever. Now it's totally the other way around. I mean, you look at Robert Kirkman and Walking Dead or these games, it's like there's this amazing work happening in sort of geek culture or traditional geek culture, but then all of the most successful development studios now are all those nerds who've been playing, Halo or whatever forever. And so it's like kind of happens in games, happens in comics, and then flows into, grows into an IP that suddenly like a big tentpole movie comes out for it. Maybe Hellboy is a good example of a mediocre, but lots of examples like that I can think of. I loved it too. I love it too, especially with the Lovecraftian themes. But the upshot, I think, is that you just see, sort of media over time rise and fall, right? So you have, theater is still vital and important, but it's more of an art form than a mass media thing, and that kind of keeps being leapfrogged up and up and up, just kind of like your chart. Like the possibility space becomes bigger, people get more engaged for longer. It's a 2-hour movie, and you can anticipate it beforehand, and then tell stories. Like I was saying, just like games, tell stories to each other, seeing it after. But that is nothing compared to, say, a social or mobile game where you have a 2-year relationship with that game, where you're constantly every week you're releasing new stuff, or especially if it's a multiplayer PvP focused one like Battle Nations or something like that, where people are just constantly engaged and moving forward with it. So how that flows up into movies, I think is going to be very interesting.
There's also, in my experience, there's a difference between film writers and TV writers. And for the projects that I've done, my experience is that TV writers tend to be a better fit, partly because of the episodic nature, partly because of the time constraint nature. TV writers, understand that there's a deadline and that you are going to have this regular release of content. So, after the game comes the downloadable content for the online game for next week's episode. So there's that resonance there, and I think film writers sometimes get maybe too far down that path that you mentioned of creating a backstory, because there is no deadline. Your script is depending on the situation done when you're ready, and so that doesn't really work for a lot of game productions.
So there's a couple of really great points that were brought up here. I've got 3 that I'm going to come back to. 2 Marty really brought up, and I'd like to actually kind of explore a little bit with our audience, we're seeing a lot, and you brought up Hellboy, which I love Hellboy. Ron Perlman rocks in Hellboy.
Oh, yeah.
I just thought he was great. And the comics and the whole thing, I love the Hellboy enterprise. But we're seeing a lot of movement across the media, both up and down. And Tomb Raider is actually a good example of that too. And you know, where things are going from the comic now. Angry Birds has a film that's being commissioned in Hollywood, which is really kind of crazy. So what do you think about this kind of cross-platform pollination? It's a bit of franchising, it's a bit of transmedia. Where do you think the trend is going? Anyone, who wants to jump in?
Just between different media.
Well, you know, one of the things that I think that we're seeing is that things are starting out as games and going into Hollywood. I know that Hollywood producers actually like this because it vets itself, it garners an audience, so it decreases the risk for them as financial investors. You know, and so it kind of makes a little bit of sense there. What do you think about it as the quality of the game and the gameplay and the stories that are being told?
Well, I think that the quality will out. I mean, that's the thing. You look at a lot of comics, you know, that came out in the era that Mike Mignola's Hellboy did, and like, there's just something about that series, like something about you know, amazing Seed of Destruction, or I mean, they're incredible storytelling that's rooted in folklore, and yet this character is very new. It's modern, you know, fish out of water kind of tale. Really, really interesting that it was compelling enough to convince like the more nerdy producers to check it out. So I don't know. Overall, like, what's the future? I think really the difference is that overall the money people are willing to back something that they probably would never have touched 30 years ago. You know, I mean, so, depending on where it's come from or where it doesn't really matter anymore. It's really about like how interesting is the idea, how interesting is the character, how compelling is the story, and that can be told in a lot of different places, a lot of different ways, and then sort of bleed into other media.
I actually kind of sympathize with some of those execs, especially the ones that got their job for reasons that had nothing to do with them actually having talent or knowing what's a good story and what's a good movie. Exactly. But we've been talking for years about let's not take a movie and make a game out of it. Let's come up with an idea, an IP, and that will be defined from the start, compatible with interactive, compatible with movie, compatible with comic book. Because so often when you make something great in one arena, you're living within that box, and you're trying to do the best within those constraints. Take the larger constraints, but again, we've been talking about this for 20 years, but the people that actually sign the checks, they know it makes a good movie, and they're going to sign that movie. And they're going to lose their job if that movie doesn't return. And the same with the comic book movie. So coming up with executives, the check signers, who actually have either the skill to recognize narrative that transcends their particular media and goes trans, versus someone who actually has the courage to accept other people's opinions and sign on something that they personally don't know is going to hit. It's a hard goal, but I know that's the next goal.
The problem these days is noise. We all are living in a world where there's, you know, all these tweets to read, all this ridiculous stream of ridiculous news to look at, you know, more marketing than ever, more film, more TV, Netflix, streaming, Hulu, watch it, take a snippet, watch the whole thing, watch the whole season. It's like this endless noise. So how do you penetrate that noise? That's the problem. And there's not just one strategy. There's going to be different ways to do it. One strategy might be, well, I'm an expert in this field and I'm going to create the best damn comic ever. And, you know, hopefully that I'm going to give myself some opportunity to go transmedia afterwards. Another strategy might be, you know, I'm going to create something that provides a unique cross-platform experience. Another strategy might be, I'm going to, you know, do a little bit of everything and see what sticks. And I don't know that there's one strategy that's right for everyone. I think it's situational.
Well, you did ask about the future. So I know the future is
Plastics.
Plastics. Actually, it's Kickstarter. Like if you look at the Goon movie, you look at the let's see, not the Infinity Engine, of course, the Eternity Engine game from Obsidian. You look at like the Shadowrun engine from like so many projects that I'm like day one I'm plopping $100 on that because I want to And so that's the fan power. That's disintermediating, like what media gets created from, I guess, all of those suits. Right? So, and you know, right down the street here, right? Project Red got funded like what 3 times what they asked for. It's just an incredible sort of these Cinderella stories keep happening with the fans participating in funding, and that's definitely new. That's newer than new. So if there's anything that's from the future, it's that.
So anybody else want to predict the future?
Not against that.
No. So it's an interesting case. I mean, in the game space, Level 7, and of course, you know, the Wii, the new game box, raised $8 million, and Level 7 raised millions of dollars for their latest game. One of the questions that I have, actually going back to that, and then I'm going to circle back around to something else that was said earlier, was, you know, is this, you know, where rock stars are being made because it's early days, in the same way that when iOS just first came out, when iTunes first came available, that it was really easy for Doodle Jump, 2 guys from the Czech Republic, to make millions of dollars, and Geared was a guy that, you know, quit his day job as a construction worker when Geared hit $1 million. And now there's 600,000 apps, I'm sorry, 600,000 games. There's more apps than that in iTunes. You know, do you think that the crowdfunding is actually going to change in that way, where it requires huge marketing and background in marketing and PR?
I think it already has. I mean, this isn't something I have a huge amount of expertise in, but I've seen most of the game Kickstarters I see be successful come from, you know, stars already. You know? And
You have to have that star power.
You got to get the star power. So really, you need the star power to get traditional funding too. So I'm not sure how much that changes it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Well, that's definitely true for the crowdsourcing stuff. In terms of the discovery problem, I mean, predicting that is difficult because the nature of discovery and the noise in the system changes every 6 months, dramatically changes every 6 months. And usually the reason that it changed is not because the world evolved or people became more informed or their tastes changed. It was because somebody somewhere changed a rule. And they changed it arbitrarily or for some
like an algorithm.
Yeah, they changed the algorithm, they changed what you can and can't do, and
That's especially true if you're developing games for Facebook. You can wake up the next day and, oh, hey, it's gone. Yeah. You know, I've got one more question, then I'd like to open it up. So, you know, coming back to the story of backstory and you know, the film writers and even what's happening in the water cooler, it seems to me that this is all a bit of fodder for creating a story world. You know, and putting it out there, because if discoverability is so difficult and expensive and virality is so desirable, and even in the money people in Hollywood, franchising that's the golden egg, right? You know, if I can create, where's my next Harry Potter? So how do you see these backstories being able to be utilized in the transmedia universe?
Well, one thing I always loved about tabletop role-playing games is that the books are not books with stories in them. They're books about a framework that have potential for infinite stories. You can tell a romance, you can tell a tragedy, you can tell a comedy, you can tell whatever you want. And so, you know, one of the visions from the cyberpunk era or whatever is like, you know, the metaverse, where there's just all these different worlds where people create them themselves. You know, it's interesting. That has kind of, you know, virtual reality, even Second Life, or what I love is, you know, not caught on in a huge mass market way. So Minecraft's probably the best example of that kind of platform, like tools given to players to create a world themselves and then tell their own stories that they like in it. But it's certainly not mass market like, say, Slime. Yeah, I guess that's a big get.
The user-generated content area is something that's been really, really hot. So that's interesting that you touched on that.
What I think about it is integrity. I mean, you know, the same reason we're drawn to people that seem to, you know, no matter what context you put them in, there's that essential part of them that you can recognize. That's that's appealing, and you know they're like sort of really there. And I think it's the same thing with your world. If there's no backstory there, then you bring it to all these different places. But what is it that you're really bringing? You're bringing a name. You're bringing an actor. Like there has to be the more of that's there, the more real it's going to feel to people. And so I think the more different platforms you're going for, the more important it is to have that.
Yeah, as usual, I want to chop the question into 17 questions. So basically, the question you're asking, it depends on where you're looking. The idea of engaging with Harry Potter because it's aspirational, because I identify with his story and his struggles and the way he overcomes them with courage and integrity, that is one situation. And then there's I want to hang out at Hogwarts, and I want to go to classes, and I want to run down the halls, and I want to cast spells.
Be there.
Yeah, and that's the place where you make your own stories. And then aspirational with Harry Potter is when you live vicariously someone else's drama. And both of those are really important ways for people to engage in media, and they have overlap, but they're very different in a lot of ways. And a lot of what it takes to connect with the audience is to understand what they want, what you're able to deliver, and then provide the right tools skillfully for that bridge to be made.
Yeah, definitely not mutually exclusive. Like I think that Harry Potter is a seed of the experience in the world of Harry Potter. That is an example that people can then either just watch linearly or go, okay, I'm going to tweak it like this and have my own experience.
Mm-hmm. Great. I know I have a ton of questions, but I'm going to open it up to the audience. I see hands already, so we'll start right here.
Since we're talking about transmedia, can you give a sense of magnitude of each media that I guess your games have been I guess mixed with, and also what strategies have you used in your games or from these other media to get one idea of a water cooler story to spread to another, or to build that relationship?
In terms of magnitude, I've worked on billion-dollar theme parks that never saw the light of day based on The Wizard of Oz. So like one of the classic.
In terms of people.
In terms, for team size?
No, like
Consumers.
customers.
Reach, huh? Well, let's see. Yeah, I mean, it's like you look at sales or whatever. I mean, the magnitude can go from with free-to-play freemium games. You get a big boost, especially on Facebook. You can reach hundreds of thousands, hopefully millions of people. And then in terms of getting them to talk about things, like the water cooler factor, it really is built into that K factor, if you're familiar with that term, like the virality, and how you encourage it in the game system without pissing the players off so much that they rage quit.
Yeah, if you want numbers, that's you.
Yeah.
You had slides.
Right, yeah, so CSI Facebook, I mentioned 2 million MAU, so I don't know the total reach, but you could, probably guess. The CSI, the Zynga games, humongous reach. Frontierville alone, total audience is at least 70 million. But if you talk about customers, not all those people actually spend any money, right? So that's a different number that I can't share. But in terms of reach, that's certainly the biggest.
That's where Jordan gets redacted. It happens to
It's
Marty
a
in
small
those places. Yeah.
No, it's a small percentage.
Yes.
It's a small percentage. It's ARPU versus ARPU. So one of the things that we say though is that not every project needs to be transmedia. And Eric was saying this earlier, kind of referring to a psychographic profile to give the audiences what they want. And so from a transmedia perspective, we really look at what is the appropriate reach for that audience, right? And if you're going after a female audience, you would probably go towards Facebook. If you're going after a youth audience, you'd go mobile, and then other audiences actually kind of dictate and move to other platforms. There are actually some numbers out there for that, and I'd be happy to share the research with you afterwards. I know we've got another question back here, so.
Hi, my name is Heather. I'm a game designer, and I'm wondering about the water cooler aspect with these social games that don't have meaningful choices, but they still manage to have that virality. And I'm wondering if there's anything about the platform that lends it to that water cooler moments without those meaningful choices.
Yeah, I mean, the water cooler moments in social games are, sharing your leveling or sharing your, you just finished this quest or, something like that. I mean, it's almost like, very simple, one-dimensional. Like, you could probably put a dimensional analysis on the water cooler stories if you want to dig in. That's just like, I did this, and it goes on your wall, and people see it sometimes they don't. And then you add the second dimension where I did this, and I need your help. And so they grab, you gotta get your doohickey from them or whatever it is. And then, what I like really is the third dimension where they're not playing the game at all. They're in their real lives, and then they tell each other stories about what happened. And that actually happened with Farmville. And so here's a story about a story. I knew Farmville was going to be huge when not only my wife, who does not play games, played it, and then her sister played it, and then their mom played it. And then they started to have like farm optimization conversations on the phone, on like chat line phone and on Skype. I could not believe it because like these were people who did not play games ever, and yet they were talking about you got to build this first, you build that the other, blah, 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 blah. So then I knew it's going to be huge. So maybe that's an example of what the range, maybe what you can do in social games might be.
I just want to speak to that a little bit. I think that meaningful choices depend on the person, and there are, he mentioned some optimization that players can do in these games, and that's real optimization. You can, there are people who are using Excel sheets to play some of these games. There's also a huge, we call it nesting, but like decoration, right? So the choices that people are making and how they're going to decorate their farm. Even if it doesn't have a gameplay impact, it's to say whether it's meaningful or not is sort of an after-the-fact judgment. That is something that people definitely take put a lot of effort into. I mean, some of the farms that you see are just unbelievable. The amount of time that's gone into that.
And I think it's greatly enhanced by players to share that. That's the thing.
Absolutely.
When you share pictures of it. That is a second-dimensional motivation to do it, other than just personal satisfaction with decorating.
And the games basically, funnel you into each other's, homes so that you can see what the other people have done. So that people are going to come check out your. It's like your living room. People are going to be in your living room, so you take pride in the way it looks. I just want to say one more thing about this, which is there's another dimension to that water cooler thing, which is how much effort it takes to generate the story. So those Minecraft stories are, incredibly rich. You can create a Game Boy and a Game Boy game in Minecraft, and that's wonderful, and it's going to make the news. But the number of people who are going to do it is extremely small. So, those opportunities that are less deep and maybe less interesting stories have the benefit of being just easy to create.
Yeah.
And that has its own, value in sort of the story economy.
Great. We have time for two more. Ginny, and then here.
Yeah, hi. Jenny, I'm primarily as a scriptwriter, and I'm primarily directing this to Jordan. What is the relationship between the story or the script that's happening in CSI and then the gameplay? So how would that interact with what would you write and what would direct people to do, that kind of thing?
The TV show versus and the game.
No, in the game. But what would you do? I mean, like there was an example where you said, search for something. I go in one of the little bubbles, and I just wondered how you would move the script along and then direct people.
I just want to understand. You're asking how within just one single game?
Through a particular game. So through the gameplay, you've got this narrative that relates to the game.
Sure. So. There's ample use of the cutscene in a number of these games, right? So, you start off with some sort of mystery, and the player is engaged to solve the mystery. So they search an environment, and there's really a pattern of finding clues, taking it to a laboratory where you process the clues in different machines that have their own mini games. That reveals new evidence, which unlocks more story and a new scene. That's the basic pattern, and I would add that for CSI, a big part of the show is, gosh, it's been a while, so I forget what they call it. But as they're collecting evidence, they'll hypothesize, right? Oh, well, maybe this happened, and you'll see these little imaginations of what they're thinking may have happened. So we include those as well, where you might collect a key piece of evidence, and if Sarah Seidel says maybe this caught on fire and that caused maybe there wasn't arson after all. And then when you go to the lab and you do some sort of analysis, you discover it was arson, right?
Thank you.
Great. It's a really interesting time in broadcast world. The Wall Street Journal had an article a couple weeks ago that television viewership for the fall shows was down 15% in the 18 to 49-year-old demographic. Now, we don't think those people aren't watching screens, they're just not watching TV. And so Jordan made a comment earlier about moving people from lower cost media to higher cost media, and I think that's the golden ring these days in media and in transmedia. Not all of these media.
Thought on bridging the gap between the narrative and the game playing sort of. If you imagine a game that is sort of like a movie the game where emotions match up with your real emotions of a real person, or if I'm a player and I play the game and it maybe scenes between my real life and the virtual world of the game, so that those two things that we talked about being incongruent or more congruent, are people moving that direction, or are people seeing that as a holy grail that's impossible to touch because of programming challenges?
Wow. Well, imagine a world 5 years from now where Siri just doesn't know what words you're saying, but knows whether you're angry, or knows whether you're sad, or knows whether you're sarcastic. And you actually can talk to the game, and it parses what you're saying, but it also parses your meaning. I actually quit playing Mass Effect because I had choices to make. And one of the choices was I was told some important piece of information, and I chose the response of, I'm not sure if I believe you. And I chose it. And my character pulled a gun out, put it in the guy's face, and says, I'm not sure I can believe you. I'm like, holy crap. That's not what I wanted to do.
I'll tell Casey about it.
And, but
you
then
got a good story out of it.
I could, second-hand story, the big water cooler here. So that's that TBD I put on my slide. There's a lot of stuff out there that I think is unsolved, but I think that there are a lot of opportunities for those to be addressed through applying known storytelling and narrative techniques to the challenges that you understand about interactive. And then there's stuff out there that is 2 steps past that. And until we know, I mean, no cutscenes, right? I still use cutscenes because that's the hammer I got in the toolbox. And until we can figure out the better hammer, that's what I'll fall back on when I have to find the lesser answer. When I can't make a game like Portal or like Left 4 Dead, where the story's scribbled all over the walls and you just pick it up as you go. And the hardcore people that don't care about that, they don't even focus on that. They just see zombie dead. And then you talk about the water cooler, that's like, what was written on the wall? What was behind that?
I guess go back and check it out.
Yeah, exactly. And the more that we can understand the range of player intents and to respect them and to appreciate them, as opposed to the designer sitting at his desk and saying, I make games for myself, and this is how I feel. That you can allow for the different player types, the different player motivations, and accommodate them as best you can, or create a situation where it's not the question. Like I mentioned before, when you're playing for an hour, and then you get a cutscene, and then you play for an hour and you get a cutscene, that's an environment for people to go off script if you have a script in mind. So you don't make that scenario. If that's the way your game works, you better not write a script that you expect people to be on.
Yeah, I really can't wait till I can make a game that checks whether somebody's scared and then does something, and then checks, and then does something, and then checks until they're out of
Who's
their
scared about
mind.
the idea of Siri knowing that you're angry?
that you sound.
Now, it's an interesting point that you make in filmmaking. We talk about Pixar does an excellent job of this with all of their children's animated features. Right, there is this underlying nuance that is really geared only towards the adults, and the 3-year-old will laugh at it, but the adult will get it. And I'm seeing the same thing in what you're talking about, that there's a certain person who's going to read the ball, and there's a certain person who's not. And so it is parody versus pastiche in that environment.
I mean, I definitely don't have an answer. To me, the different things that are available to us in terms of, I love Portal. But I also love Uncharted, and I don't have a strong opinion about what is allowed or not allowed in an experience. And I think it's good that people have strong opinions, and it creates good, strong content that carries that person's opinion. But ultimately, I think it's also good that different people have different ways of doing it, and I like that. I also think that in the transmedia world, we're going to have to open ourselves up to more ways of doing things. And to using any technique that's available. That said, I think the problem is noise. Like there's so much noise in the world right now. I think that people are craving real human connection, and if we can figure, and that's why you have these social games. But then these social games, are they actually facilitating that or not? And I think that's a worthwhile debate to have. But I think the people that can crack that problem and make people feel more connected, those are the properties that I think are going to explode in the next 10 years.
Great.
Can I answer that question? I think it's the wrong question. You're asking how do you address the disconnect between your avatar's emotions and your emotions. And I think you need to be asking yourself, why do we have an avatar? And I think if you look at things like alternate reality games, which are a subset of transmedia, that avatar is going to go away. And I think that's where things are going to go in that direction in 10 years.
I think that's true, that will happen in some segments, but there are people that want to go to a movie and they want to see Indiana Jones. And there are people that want to be Indiana Jones. And whenever I'm put into a gaming environment that it's everyman, it's just me, I'm not actually role-playing somebody else, and I know I'm not going to shoot anybody. I know I'm not going to. So there's this vicarious gap between what people want to do in life and what they want to do in fantasy. And there are different ways for people to cross that bridge. And I absolutely love that idea of people being able to immerse and express their inner demons directly. I'm convinced that that's not going to supersede the aspirational role-playing comic book hero stuff, where people can say, I don't want to think about me flying. I want to identify and live vicariously through that guy flying.
In 2 days, it will be Halloween, and you will see people taking on their aspirational roles. And it's not come as yourself, right? It's come as, I just really want to thank this audience. I hope to invite them each back. I know that they could all do a keynote for us in the future, but let's give them a round of applause and thank them. They're all going to be here. Actually, we'll pull out some more beer and wine and stuff. But before we cut to that, we have some announcements and some community announcements from members of our community. Mike, did you want to talk about next month's event?
Hi, everybody. So our next event is going to be actually on Tuesday, November 27th. We're going to give everybody an extra day to recover from Thanksgiving. And it's going to be all around the emerging role of the transmedia producer. And we're going to be hosting that at Westernized Production with a host of really great women producers. This is going to be a whole women panel, which is our first time. And we're very excited. We have one of our panelists here already. But the rest are going to be a secret, Susan Bell. But yeah, so come join us. The Eventbrites are going to go out tomorrow, so we hope to see you all there.
Great. For those of us unfortunate enough to have to go to our families for Thanksgiving, are you going to put it online or anything like that?
We are hopefully going to be recording all of it, but always we have Aline here that posts our events every time a day after, so we are going to have that online in one form or other.
Great. And we do try to post the events and the content of the events Elise.
Hello, I'm Elise from Transmedia SF as well. So, do you guys know what Startup Weekend is? So basically it's a hackathon, so people get together for a whole weekend and they build prototypes of startups or projects. So usually people build startups, but we are launching Startup Weekend Transmedia. So basically a hackathon where we'll be building together transmedia stories and projects. So you're all welcome to come. It's going to happen here at Perisoma. Thanks, by the way, thank you to Perisoma for welcoming us. It's going to happen here at Perisoma January 18th. Tickets are not on sale now, but stay tuned, and we're also going to start a bunch of classes on transmedia production and writing and everything here at Perisoma too. So stay tuned, and we hope to see you all and build really cool stories at Startup Weekend. Thanks.
Thank you. So for those of you that didn't know, we actually had a successful Transmedia Jam this summer that was 30 hours long. This is a longer version of that. We had incredible success, and I see some faces that were there with us. We had a rockin' weekend then, and we're looking to actually take it the next step and add monetization for Transmedia. And one of our community members, and actually a member of my team at Match Factor, Kevin Smith.
Hi, I just wanted to take the chance to introduce myself to the group. I'm Kevin Smith. I'm an independent game developer working on Lost Spells, The Tower of Alba. I've always enjoyed games, particularly card and board games. I've spent many hours working on playing with words, and Lost Spells is kind of my realization of that. I spent many years in the game industry working for companies like Namco, working on titles like the best-selling Top Wheel for CrowdStar, and finally I decided I wanted to start to work on my own games. And I wanted to make games that I wanted to play. I wanted to make games that were casual and inviting, but treated the players respectfully and offered their minds a stimulating challenge. And Lost Spells is what I came up with. Lost Spells is an adventure game based on the shattered spellbooks in the Lost Tower of Alba. The players proceed through a series of jigsaw word puzzles and recreate the crosswords, earning gold, energy, and learning the spells that they need to help our heroes, Neat and Beck, through a mysterious Celtic adventure. And I'm reaching out to people in this group. I'm looking for particularly anybody who has experience launching an independent game or who has experience with crowdsourcing. These are things that I'm looking to do with this game. I hope what I can contribute back is, I do have a lot of experience developing games, especially on the technical side, and I'll certainly share my stories with you as I go forward with this, and as I learn things, hopefully you can learn them with me. Thank you.
Great. So Kevin will be launching an Indiegogo campaign. We'll let you all know about it. So we want to support and connect our community to each other. So I hope when you see Lost Spells launch on Indiegogo that you'll throw some support that way. We've got some great perks, including some parties coming up for that. Our next announcement for our community is Stephen.
Thank you. Hey there. Hey, I'll be quick. I'm Steven. I'm a tech guy. I used to work on Delicious, the social bookmarking site, if any of you have heard of that, hopefully. Cool, some naughty heads, good old days. I had a startup called Blockboard that I founded that was acquired earlier this year. Anyway, boring stuff. What's really interesting is that I have a real passion for games and for storytelling. When I was a kid, I was really into theater. I love film, TV, games, video games. I played my share of Call of Cthulhu, actually. So role-playing games, all that kind of stuff. So I feel that not enough people are kind of equipped to tell stories, but everybody has stories in their head. And the means of production are not in the hands of the people generally. Like, so most of us in this room actually can't make video games, right? We certainly can't make TV or film, although some of us can. So anyway, I created something called Tell Together, which is a web tool that lets anyone create multiplayer storytelling games. So you don't have to be a programmer, you just have to know how to basically edit a wiki, and you have to have an idea for a story, obviously. What it lets you do is create reusable story worlds. So these are text documents that can be used to create interactive games that are multiplayer. So you could say I have an idea for a story setting, maybe it's science fiction, maybe it's romance, maybe it's mystery. Then you can create this and publish it, and then you and other people can create unlimited numbers of games from them and play them online. One player takes the role of the narrator, the other players take the roles of the characters in the story, and the system helps you coordinate telling the story over time as an ongoing narrative. So this is not launched yet, it's a thing I built. I'm looking for feedback is why I'm here. So I'd love it if you check it out. These links will let you look at the example game and then actually sign up. Let me know what you think, like positive or negative. I'm just curious what people think.
Great. Stephen's looking for beta testers for the new platform. So maybe we'll actually show you off at one of our jams. One of the things, we've changed the format a little bit. We're asking people to kind of submit to us the announcements in advance, but Ginny's been a long-time member of a community, so she's got something she wants to announce.
Hi, I'm doing a book on finding funds for your film, and I've written about 200 pages in space so far. I'm looking for two things. One is for people who want to tell their story about how they raise funds for a film, particularly an independent film. And the second thing I'm looking for is people who might want to read the preliminary manuscript to give me feedback or be endorsers if you like it, and have your website and other links included. It's being published by Hal Leonard, and it's a follow-up book to my original book that I wrote with them called The Complete Guide to Writing, Producing, and Directing a Low-Budget Short Film. So anybody who's interested, please contact me about it, and I can send you a PDF of the manuscript.
Thank you. So Ginny is looking for people to interview and people to edit and read and proof her book. So that's actually going to wrap us up for the night, and I want to thank everybody again for coming. Our panelists and speakers are going to be here for a little while with us. Look for us right after Thanksgiving when we're having the Producer's Guide to the Galaxy, Transmedia Producer's Guide to the Galaxy. I look forward to seeing you all then. Thanks, everyone.